There's a strange moment that happens in almost every human life. A moment nobody talks about. You're standing at the edge of something important. Maybe speaking up in a meeting, starting a business, approaching someone you admire, posting your first video, changing careers, asking for a raise, confessing your feelings, or chasing a dream that secretly terrifies you. And right before you act, your mind betrays you. Not dramatically, not loudly, quietly. What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? What if I'm not good enough? What if people judge me? And in that tiny, invisible moment, most lives change direction, not because people lack talent, not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack opportunity, but because fear whispers louder than possibility. And what's fascinating is this. Most people think confidence is supposed to come before action. They believe confident people somehow wake up fearless, like courage is a personality trait gifted only to a lucky few. But if you study human behavior carefully, you begin noticing something almost shocking. The people who seem the most confident are often just the people who learned how to move while feeling afraid. That changes everything, because suddenly confidence stops being magic. It becomes a skill. Think about childhood for a second. When children learn to walk, nobody expects elegance. Nobody says, "You should practice privately until you can walk perfectly." No, they stumble, fall, crash into furniture, cry, try again, and everyone claps. But somewhere along the way, adulthood changes the rules. Suddenly people feel ashamed of being beginners. They want mastery before practice, certainty before movement, confidence before experience. And because of that, millions stay trapped in hesitation. The tragedy is not that people fail. The tragedy is that so many never begin. There's a hidden epidemic in the modern world. Not disease, not poverty, not lack of intelligence. Psychological paralysis. People overthinking themselves into small lives. Imagine someone standing at the edge of a swimming pool for years reading books about swimming, studying techniques, watching tutorials, analyzing risks. Meanwhile, another person jumps into the water awkwardly, struggles at first, swallows water, embarrasses themselves, and eventually learns. That's life. Action teaches lessons thinking never can, but the human brain loves certainty. It wants guarantees, protection, safety. The brain's ancient job is survival, not fulfillment. That's important to understand because many people assume fear means stop. But often fear simply means this matters. Think about every meaningful thing humans experience. Love, creativity, ambition, connection, growth, all of them involve vulnerability. And vulnerability feels dangerous because it exposes us emotionally. Rejection hurts, failure hurts, judgment hurts. So people build invisible walls around themselves. They play safe, stay quiet, avoid risk, avoid visibility, and eventually they confuse safety with living. But safety can slowly become a prison. You see it everywhere. People staying in jobs that drain their souls because uncertainty feels scarier than misery. People remaining silent about dreams because criticism feels unbearable. People pretending to be someone else because authenticity feels risky. People waiting endlessly to feel ready. But readiness is one of the biggest illusions humans chase. Because nobody truly feels ready for transformation. The athlete doesn't feel ready before competition. The entrepreneur doesn't feel ready before launching. The artist doesn't feel ready before creating. The parent doesn't feel ready before raising a child. Humans grow by entering experiences bigger than their current identity. Confidence is built inside uncertainty, not before it. And maybe that's one of the greatest misunderstandings about fear. People think fear is proof they cannot do something, but fear is often proof they are standing near growth. Imagine climbing a mountain. Halfway up, your legs shake, your breathing changes. The height becomes uncomfortable. That discomfort does not mean go back. It means you're climbing. Psychological growth feels similar. When humans stretch beyond familiar limits, discomfort appears naturally. The problem is modern culture has trained people to worship comfort. Comfortable jobs, comfortable routines, comfortable conversations, comfortable identities, and while comfort feels good temporarily, too much comfort quietly weakens people. Muscles weaken without resistance. Confidence weakens without challenge. Courage weakens without action. A life designed entirely around avoiding discomfort eventually becomes emotionally fragile. That's why small problems overwhelm people who never practice resilience. The mind adapts to what it repeatedly experiences. If someone repeatedly avoids fear, avoidance becomes habit. But if someone repeatedly faces discomfort voluntarily, strength develops. This is why tiny acts of courage matter so much. Speaking honestly, trying publicly, setting boundaries, taking risks, starting before certainty arrives. These moments seem small externally, but internally they reshape identity. Because identity is not built through thinking alone. It's built through evidence. Every action becomes a vote for the kind of person you believe yourself to be. When someone repeatedly acts courageously despite fear, the brain slowly updates its self-image. Oh, maybe we are capable. And that realization changes lives. But here's where things become deeply interesting. Most people are not destroyed by external obstacles. They are destroyed by their relationship with their own thoughts. Human beings have conversations inside their minds all day long, and often those conversations are brutal. You'll fail. You're awkward. You're not attractive enough. You're too late. You're not smart enough. People will laugh at you. Now imagine hearing those messages every day for years. Eventually, they stop sounding like opinions. They start sounding like truth. But thoughts are strange things. Just because a thought appears in your mind does not make it reality. Humans often treat thoughts like commands instead of mental weather. Imagine believing every cloud in the sky controls your destiny. That's how many people live psychologically. A fearful thought appears and immediately controls behavior. I feel anxious, therefore I shouldn't do it. I feel uncertain, therefore I must not be ready. But emotions are not always accurate maps. Sometimes fear exaggerates danger. Sometimes anxiety predicts disasters that never happen. Sometimes insecurity lies. The mind evolved to detect threats, and unfortunately, modern humans experience emotional threats constantly. Social judgment, comparison, embarrassment, rejection. The brain reacts to these almost like physical danger. That's why public speaking terrifies people. That's why vulnerability feels terrifying. That's why rejection feels crushing. But here's the paradox. Avoiding fear temporarily reduces anxiety, while strengthening fear long-term. Every avoided situation teaches the brain that danger was real. And slowly life shrinks. People avoid conversations, avoid opportunities, avoid dreams, avoid growth. Until eventually they wake up trapped inside routines they never consciously chose. Fear rarely destroys lives dramatically. It destroys them quietly, through hesitation, delay, excuses, overthinking, silence. One postponed decision at a time. And maybe the saddest part is this. Many people believe confidence is something they must find within themselves before acting. As if somewhere hidden deep inside exists a magical reservoir of certainty. But confidence is not discovered. It's constructed, brick by brick, through experience. A person becomes confident speaking by speaking, confident leading by leading, confident creating by creating, not by endlessly preparing mentally. There's a reason athletes train physically instead of only visualizing success. Action changes humans, and one of the most dangerous habits in the modern world is excessive thinking without movement. People analyze possibilities endlessly. What if this happens? What if that goes wrong? What if I regret it? Meanwhile, life passes. Thinking becomes emotional quicksand. The mind creates imaginary catastrophes while reality waits patiently for action. And ironically, overthinkers often believe they're being responsible. But endless analysis without execution becomes avoidance disguised as intelligence. At some point, wisdom requires movement. Not perfect movement, just movement. A musician improves by playing imperfect songs. A writer improves by writing imperfect pages. A creator improves by publishing imperfect work. Perfectionism is often fear wearing elegant clothing. It sounds intelligent. I just want everything perfect first. But beneath perfectionism usually lives terror, fear of criticism, fear of judgment, fear of failure. So people wait endlessly for the perfect moment, but life does not reward endless waiting. The perfect moment rarely arrives. Because courage creates moments, it doesn't wait for them. And maybe this is why some people with average talent accomplish extraordinary things while gifted people stay stuck. Execution. The world rewards movement more than hidden potential. There are countless brilliant people living invisible lives because fear convinced them not to try. And there are ordinary people achieving remarkable things because they acted despite self-doubt. Action creates momentum. Momentum changes identity. Identity changes destiny. But to understand confidence deeply, you must first understand something uncomfortable about human psychology. People become addicted to emotional certainty, even painful certainty. A person may remain in unhealthy patterns simply because they feel familiar. Familiar misery often feels safer than unfamiliar possibility. That's why transformation feels emotionally disorienting. New confidence feels strange at first. New habits feel unnatural. New boundaries feel uncomfortable. The brain prefers known pain over unknown change. Imagine living in a dark room for years. Eventually, the darkness becomes normal. Suddenly, opening the curtains feels overwhelming. Growth works similarly. Humans adapt to limitations so deeply they begin defending it. Someone says, "You should try." And the mind responds instantly, "But what if I fail?" Someone says, "You're capable." And internally the person thinks, "You don't understand me." People cling to old identities because identity feels safe, even destructive identity. I'm shy. I'm unlucky. I'm anxious. I'm not leadership material. Repeated often enough, these labels become prisons because humans unconsciously behave in alignment with identity. A person who identifies as not confident will constantly search for evidence supporting that belief. But identity is far more flexible than most people realize. Human beings are adaptive creatures. A terrified person can become courageous. An insecure person can become resilient. A quiet person can become powerful. Not overnight, but through repeated action that challenges old stories. And stories matter immensely, because the human mind runs on narrative. Everyone carries an invisible script about who they are. Some scripts empower, others imprison. The person who says, "I always fail," notices failure constantly. The person who says, "I learn quickly," interprets setbacks differently. Same world, different internal narrative, different emotional reality. That's why self-awareness is so powerful. Without awareness, people live automatically. Same reactions, same fears, same patterns. They mistake conditioning for personality. But once someone begins observing their mind instead of blindly obeying it, transformation begins. Imagine standing beside a river watching leaves float past. Thoughts work similarly. They appear, move, disappear. But many people jump into the river and get carried away by every thought. One anxious thought ruins the entire day. One criticism destroys confidence. One failure becomes identity. Emotionally strong people are not people without negative thoughts. They are people who stop treating every thought like absolute truth. That distinction changes lives. Because confidence is not, "I never feel fear." Confidence is, "I can act even while fear exists." That's real power. And strangely enough, confidence often appears after action, not before. A person may tremble before speaking publicly, then feel empowered afterward. A person may feel terrified before applying for opportunity, then realize survival afterward. Action rewires the nervous system. The brain learns through experience. We can handle this. This is why avoidance strengthens anxiety while exposure weakens it. Humans adapt to repeated experience. The first rejection feels unbearable. The 10th feels survivable. The 100th barely matters. Experience changes emotional intensity, but modern humans often want emotional certainty before gaining experience, which creates paralysis. Imagine refusing to enter a gym until becoming fit first. Absurd, right? Yet, psychologically, people do this constantly. I'll start once I'm confident. But confidence is earned through participation. And maybe the deeper issue underneath insecurity is this. People are terrified of being judged, not physically harmed, judged. Humans evolved socially. Belonging mattered for survival. So social rejection activates deep fear systems inside the brain. This is why embarrassment feels disproportionately painful. People would rather stay invisible than risk looking foolish, but invisibility carries its own suffering, because hidden potential eventually becomes regret. There's a quiet pain that develops when humans continuously betray themselves. They feel it during sleepless nights, long commutes, moments alone with their thoughts, a sense that they were meant for more. Not necessarily fame, not wealth, just more aliveness, more authenticity, more expression, more courage. But then fear whispers, stay safe. And safety slowly drains vitality from life. You can see it in people's eyes sometimes. They stopped dreaming years ago. Not because dreams disappeared, because fear convinced them dreaming was dangerous. And maybe this is why courage matters more than confidence. Confidence fluctuates. Courage decides. A courageous person still feels uncertainty, still feels anxiety, still doubts themselves sometimes. But they move anyway. That anyway changes destinies. Someone asks the person out anyway, launches the project anyway, posts the video anyway, leaves the toxic environment anyway, and every courageous action expands the psychological boundaries of identity. Life becomes larger, not because fear disappears, because fear stops controlling direction. Imagine driving a car with fear sitting beside you. Fear talks constantly. This might go wrong. You could embarrass yourself. What if people reject you? Most people hand fear the steering wheel, but emotionally intelligent people eventually realize fear can come along for the ride, but it does not control the destination. That mindset creates freedom, because suddenly people stop waiting to feel fearless before living fully. They understand emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent dictators. And this matters deeply because human emotions change constantly. One day motivation feels strong, the next day it disappears. One day confidence feels high, the next day insecurity returns. If people base action entirely on emotion, consistency becomes impossible. This is where values become important. Values outlast moods. A person committed to growth acts even when fear appears. A person committed to honesty speaks even when uncomfortable. A person committed to purpose continues even when motivation fades. Values anchor behavior, and perhaps one of the strongest forms of confidence comes from self-trust. Knowing, I do what I say I'll do. That changes internal psychology dramatically. Every promise kept to yourself strengthens identity. Every avoided responsibility weakens it. People often think confidence comes from compliments, success, or validation. But lasting confidence usually comes from integrity with oneself. Keeping commitments, facing discomfort, acting with courage repeatedly. You become someone your own mind respects. and self-respect creates emotional stability external approval never can. Because external validation is unstable. Praise disappears. Criticism appears. Opinions change constantly. If identity depends entirely on applause, emotional collapse becomes inevitable. That's why people addicted to approval struggle deeply. They shape personalities around acceptance, silence authenticity, fear disagreement. But authentic living requires tolerating judgment. No meaningful life escapes criticism. If someone creates publicly, criticism comes. If someone leads, criticism comes. If someone changes, criticism comes. Trying to avoid all judgment guarantees mediocrity. And strangely enough, many people judge others because they secretly abandoned their own courage. Watching someone else live boldly forces people to confront their own hesitation. That's why ambitious people often face criticism from those unwilling to take risks themselves. But criticism is rarely proof you're wrong. Often it's proof you're visible. And visibility is uncomfortable because humans naturally fear exposure. Yet, meaningful life requires being seen. Love requires vulnerability. Art requires vulnerability. Truth requires vulnerability. A fully protected heart also becomes a lonely heart. And maybe the greatest irony of human psychology is this. People avoid temporary discomfort and accidentally create permanent dissatisfaction. They avoid difficult conversations and stay trapped in resentment. Avoid risks and stay trapped in regret. Avoid vulnerability and stay trapped in loneliness. Short-term comfort often creates long-term suffering, but short-term courage often creates long-term freedom. Now, this is why emotional flexibility matters more than emotional control. Many people waste years trying to eliminate anxiety completely. But humans are emotional creatures. Fear will appear. Doubt will appear. Insecurity will appear. The goal is not emotional perfection. The goal is psychological flexibility. The ability to continue living meaningfully even while uncomfortable thoughts exist. Imagine waiting for waves to disappear before entering the ocean. You'd never swim. Emotions work similarly. Waiting for complete certainty before living means life never fully begins. And maybe this explains why some people appear fearless. Not because they lack fear, because they stopped negotiating with every fearful thought. They learned thoughts are suggestions, not commands. That distinction creates enormous freedom. Because suddenly someone can think, I might fail and still act. I feel nervous and still speak. I'm uncertain and still begin. That's transformation. Not becoming fearless. Becoming larger than fear. And perhaps one of the deepest shifts a human can experience is realizing you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness observing them. That separation matters enormously. Because if every thought defines reality, humans become prisoners of mental noise.